Before we get into the video, congratulations to Alex and Bud the Bloodletter for winning this month's giveaway. We'll be doing another giveaway for the 1st of August thanks to a very generous donation from a viewer, and it'll be for a free character, so keep an eye out for it. Alright everyone, it's a tier list. You know the deal. I'm going to give my arbitrary opinion on what makes something good, and then I'm going to rank it based on how well it meets those conditions. Figure it's probably a pretty good time to get one of these in. We've got time to wait for data for Pariah Nexus. I've done a video on every army in the game, so it's a pretty good time to just crank one of these out. No, I'm not including you. You aren't a real army. Not even James Workshop likes you. Go away. Now, for each of the combat patrols, we're going to be ranking them on 7 different categories. Number 1. Are they over 480 points? A combat patrol should be enough for you to get straight into a 500 point game. So why did I pick 480 points? Every army has an enhancement that's going to cost somewhere between 20 to maybe 10 to 15 points. So a character in each combat patrol should be able to get you to 500 points with one of those enhancements. If it was over 500 points, then you'll have to cut something. If it's less than that, then you might wind up at like 470 even with the enhancement. So 480 just feels like a good clean number. Number 2, is the combat patrol giving you over 30% savings? Now this is one that's going to be a lot harder for some of the new combat patrols than some of the older ones because Games Workshop likes money, but a good combat patrol should be a good deal for you to buy as an intro into the faction. At about 30% savings, I think that the combat patrols are almost always going to be a good value, even if you don't want one of the kits inside of the box. Number 3, can all the characters in the box lead at least one unit in the box? This sounds like a ridiculous qualifier that should only apply to combat patrols made before 10th edition, because after all, why would GW make combat patrols that don't work by having leaders that can't lead units in the combat patrol? Number 4, is there a centerpiece model in the combat patrol? A good combat patrol needs to have that cool model that shows off that big, intimidating unit that you can put a lot of extra time and effort and care into if you wanted to show off your painting skills. It also needs to be something that your opponent is at least in theory scared of. So support units are not going to be able to be a good centerpiece model. Things like transports or units that have most of their value tied into supporting the other units in the combat patrol are just not going to cut it. I know that these are important in bigger armies, but at a 500 point game, your transport isn't going to matter as much as it will in a 2000 point game. Number 5, are the units in this box flexible? That can mean that they can either be built as several different types of units, not just including loadouts, but entirely different units. They could be played across multiple armies as allies, or they can be played in other games modes entirely. If at least half the units in the box are flexible, it's going to get a pass. Number 6, is this combat patrol worth buying 2 of? There are some combat patrols that are just great, except that you really don't want a second copy. Having a combat patrol that you can buy multiple times over and still be pretty happy with is a very big deal, as that means that you're going to get those savings multiple times over and be pretty happy about it. And number 7, is this combat patrol worth buying 3 of? Now this might sound ridiculous as opposed to, just making this a joint universal, do you want to buy multiple of this combat patrol? But if you can get away with an army where you want to buy 3 copies of their combat patrol, and you are happy with it, then it's going to make an incredible combat patrol that's going to operate as the best possible entry point for that army. Now, before we get too deep into this, there are 2 combat patrols that I want to say straight up are disqualified from even being on this tier list. Those are going to be Combat Patrol Space Marines and Combat Patrol Tyranids. If you wanted to buy either of these, it is cheaper to just buy the starter set plus the 1 kit that the starter set is missing compared to the Combat Patrol, and it will still be cheaper than the price of the Combat Patrol. And you're going to get a bunch of models for the other faction. That's just kind of a nice little bonus. To give you an idea, if you wanted to buy both Combat Patrols from Games Workshop, MSRP, it's going to be $336. You're going to get 1 Terminator Captain, 1 Terminator Librarian, 5 Terminators, 5 Infernus Marines, 1 Winged Tyranid Prime, and 1 Psychophage, with 3 Von Ryan's Leapers, 5 Barbagonts, 20 Termagants, and 2 Ripper Swarms. On the other hand, for $336, you can buy 3 starter sets, and it will give you 3 Terminator Captains, 15 Terminators, 15 Infernus Marines, 3 Winged Tyranid Primes, 3 Psychophages, 9 Von Ryan's Leapers, 60 Termagants, and 6 Ripper Swarms. If 5 Barbagonts and a Terminator Librarian is worth all of those extra models to you, then I'm going to go and take the 3 free 30x22 gaming mats that came in the starter set, and I'm going to beat you over the head with them, because no, it is not. Stop it. Now we're going to go through this in alphabetical order based on faction. We're going to be starting off with the Imperium in general, moving into Space Marines, moving into Chaos Space Marines, and then moving into all of the Xenos factions. So first up, we've got one of the newest combat patrols, the Adepta Sororitas. It's got a Canoness, 10 Battle Sisters, 10 Arcoflagellants, and 5 Celestine Sacrosancts. Comes out to 390-ish points, and you're going to get about a 25% discount off of the $225 of value that's in the box. This means that this is going to come out to only 2 points. It's got a character who can lead a unit in the box, and it's good to buy 2 of. Yeah, it might not be the most exciting purchase ever, but Battle Sister squads are fine, especially with the new start of Pariah Nexus where Battle Line matters more. Arcoflagellants are solid, and Celestine Sacrosancts, we're seeing some play, and I imagine they'll probably be pretty okay. Besides that, Sisters is just an expensive army to collect. I think this is overall a downgrade from the Combat Patrol that they just had, where it was worth buying just for the bits because of how well it meshed with the other things, but I think that you can still get a lot of work done with this. Its one downside is that with the way that the detachments work for Sisters, while none of these units are bad, they kind of want to go into different detachments, and it makes it a little bit more awkward. For now, the Sisters of Battle Combat Patrol is just going to go at the top of the 2 to 3 point tier, but it's not going to be staying there for very long. Up next, we've got our favorite Golden Banana Boys, the Adeptus Custodes. Their Combat Patrol is going to come with 1 Blade Champion, 5 Custodian Guards, 3 Alaris Custodians, and 5 Custodian Wardens. This comes out to 780 points, with a bit of an asterisk, because Custodes units are set up in a way where you can take one of the models out and make them a leader unit and then put them back in. If you do this by making one of the Custodian Guards or a Warden and one of the Alaris Terminators into their various Shield Captain varieties, you can still have a leader in every single unit, and the box value goes up to 945 points. The overall cost of kits, though, is only going to be $227, which is a 26% savings. This does mean that at the end of the day, though, the Custodians are going to come out to 5 points. They're over 480, they have characters that can lead every unit that's in the box. The units are flexible, you can very easily turn more of them into leaders or less of them into leaders if you wanted to. It's good to buy 2 of, and it's even good to buy 3 of, considering the fact that it can so easily get you to 2,000 points. You want a lot of guards, you want a lot of wardens, Blade Champions are awesome, gives you so many character options, it just hits every single nail that you want, except for those last couple, such as the total percent savings. It's going straight up into that 5-point tier. Moving on to AdMech, we see that the Combat Patrol has a Tech Priest Manipulus, it's got 10 Skitarii Rangers, it's got 5 Traxxas Skystalkers, and it's got 3 Cerberus Raiders. This is going to come out to a very abysmal 275 points, with $225 of value in the box for a 25% savings. This is one of those cases where I was surprised that the Mechanicus did as well as they did. They've got a character who can lead a unit in the box. They've got very flexible units between having multiple Skitarii profiles, multiple Cerberus profiles, and multiple Taraxi profiles. And it's not that bad to buy two of, considering it is savings in Admech, and Taraxis can be very good. You want Skitarii, Cerberus are fine, and the Tech Priest Manipulus at least does something that's kind of useful for the army. This does mean that it is unfortunately going to have to go above the Sisters of Battle, just because it did outrank them, but I will say that I do like the Sisters of Battle more. On to the next combat patrol, we have the Astra Militarum. It's going to come with a Cadian command squad, 2 units of 10 Cadian shock troops, 2 field ordnance batteries, and a sentinel. It's coming out to an overall value of 360 points. And at $252 of value in the box, it's a 33% saving. The Guard are going to score 3 points on their combat patrol. They're over 30% savings, the character can lead units, and it does have flexible units. Cadian shock troops can very easily be turned into infantry squads, the armored sentinel can absolutely turn into a scout sentinel, and the Cadian command squad can very easily be a platoon command squad. You just gotta do a little bit of work to give them maybe a little bit of a different paint job to make them look those different ways, but at the end of the day, it's still going to be perfectly fine. Now, if you told me that you wanted this to be 4 points because, hey, it's got good value and it has flexible units, then I could totally believe it and you could absolutely sway me. The problem for me is just that it has way too many infantry and the field ordnance batteries aren't really doing it a lot of favors. If instead, maybe the field ordnance batteries had been swapped out for a tank, or you could have even swapped out one of the units of Cadian shock troops and the field ordnance battery for tank, I think it would be a much easier recommendation to buy multiple copies of. Also, note, the Sentinel is not a centerpiece unit. It don't care if you have it as the Armored Sentinel or the Scout Sentinel. A Sentinel is not something that your opponent is going to be scared of. It's a phenomenal support unit. I think that you want it in almost every single guard list. I think that the utility that it brings is great, and the Armored Sentinel is very annoying to deal with, but it's just not a good centerpiece model. Because it is a 3-point army, it's going to go in the tier with Sisters and Admech, but because it is not nearly as insulting as the Admech one is, it's going to go way higher up. Up next, we've got the Grey Knights, and I know a lot of people would put them in the Space Marine camp, but I'm not going to because they aren't really Space Marines. They really are closer to Custodes in my mind in terms of how you're going to run them. So looking at their combat patrol, we've got a Brotherhood Librarian, we've got 5 Brotherhood Terminators, we've got 5 Strike Squad members, and we've got a Nemesis Dread Knight. Overall, it's coming out to about 655 points, and it's going to be coming out to $200 of stuff in the box at a 16% savings. Now this is a phenomenal combat patrol. It's going to come in at 6 points for our criteria. It's well over 480 points. The Librarian can absolutely lead models that are in this unit. The units are very flexible between being able to run either Terminator option. You've got all of the different options for the Strike Team models, and then the Nemesis Dread Knight can very easily be a Grandmaster Dread Knight. I think that the baby carrier looks a little ridiculous, but it's still a centerpiece model, and it's still something that you have to be scared of. It's not just a support unit. I also think that this is something that you absolutely want to buy 2 of. Grey Knights don't have a very large range, and this is pretty much the entire range in a box. And it's split up in a way where it actually makes sense to want to buy a lot of copies of it. To the point that I think that buying 3 of it is still a good idea. The 4th one is probably where you skip over it because you don't really need 4 librarians. But if that's the only thing that's really making this not good to buy 4 of, then have at it. It's going straight to the top of the tier list right now. Now, the Space Marines are all getting put together in this little section because they have one thing that the rest of the Imperium units don't have, and that is they are Space Marines. That means that every single box can be used for every single Space Marine faction, except for you Black Templars, but we'll deal with you later. This means that while I don't necessarily love buying 2 copies of any of the Space Marine Combat Patrols, I think that buying 2 Space Marine Combat Patrols is great, as long as you buy different army boxes. Mixing and matching them gives you really good starter armies, such as the Deathwatch and Blood Angels, coming together to get you 6 aggressors with an Apothecary Biologist to lead them, 10 intercessors being led by a lieutenant, 5 intercessors being led by a librarian going around in an impulsor, and an extra 5-man Cursor unit just backing you up with good support. The last thing to keep in mind for all of these Space Marine Combat Patrols is that they come with upgrade sprues to give you that little extra bit of detail, like special shoulder pads or helmets. I don't consider these to give any actual value to the Combat Patrol though, because that $30 upgrade sprue could have just as easily been an extra character that you could actually play, and it would give the box more options. If you think that the upgrade sprue has value, awesome, I'm happy for you. But it is a waste of money, and it really brings down the value of these boxes. Oh boy, Space Marines, you are starting off strong with the Blood Angels. It's going to give you a Librarian, 5 Intercessors, 5 Incursors, 3 Aggressors, and an Impulsor. Now overall, the point value here is pretty low because of that aforementioned upgrade sprue debacle, but it's still 425 points, which is okay. It's got $246 of value in the box, not including the sprue, to get you 32% savings. This means the Blood Angels are going to score 3 points. They're over 30% savings. The Librarian can lead the Intercessors or the Incursors. It's got flexible units because they can be played in Blood Angels. You could play them in Space Wolves. You could play them in Codex Space Marines. You could play it in Black Templars. Kind of. So it really is very flexible. I do think that this is the best Space Marine Combat Patrol if you are just looking at general Space Marines, because none of these units are max squad size, meaning that buying 2 of this box itself isn't awful. Still not great, but it's not awful. But it does also mean that you can pair it with any of the other Combat Patrols and still get good value out of it without having more Intercessors than you can fit in your deployment zone. It's going straight to the top of the 3-point tier. I like this Combat Patrol quite a bit. Up next, we have the current problem child of Space Marines, the Black Templars. They're going to come with 1 Marshal, 5 Intercessors, a 10-man Crusader squad, and an Impulsor. Overall, it's getting you 390 points, kind of meh, whatever, and it's $206 of value for 18% savings. It's going to wind up hitting 2 points because the Marshal is able to lead the units that are in the box, and it is good to buy 2 of if you are a Black Templar, but this is not a flexible Space Marine box. It's only really usable in Black Templars, as the Marshal and the Crusader Squad are limited to the Black Templars. It would be kind of nice if this had a little bit more flexibility, but given that this is actually a box that is designated for that specific subfaction of Space Marines instead of being a little bit more generic, it does still kind of work out nicely as something that you can go and grab a couple of if you really want to do Black Templars specifically. This is ultimately going to go into that 2-point tier, but I think that I'm going to be putting it below the Sisters of Battle because at $206, it's just much lower savings, and I feel like you get a better set of options with the Sisters of Battle since it doesn't have that Impulsor, which really only has the 1 unit of Intercessors that it can even fit, which would want to be in your backfield sticking an objective anyways, so it's kind of an anti-synergy. Alright, let's move on to the Dark Angels. It's a Captain Gravis armor, it's 10 Intercessors, it's 3 Blade Guard vets, and it's 5 Hellblasters. Overall, it's 445 points. Sounds pretty good on the surface, but it's only $194 at 14% savings, and it's going to only get 1 point on my list. The Dark Angels box has flexible units. It can be played across multiple different armies of Space Marines, but to me, I kind of consider this as your Blood Angels Combat Patrol Part 2 Dark Green Boogaloo kind of box, because it just doesn't makes sense. There's nothing for the captain to lead. It's not a particularly good value. It's not a lot of points. There's no real centerpiece model, and you don't want to buy 2 of these because it's got 10 intercessors in it. If this box had 3 eradicators instead of 5 of the intercessors that are in the back, it would have most likely been fine, and I might have even considered it being a multi-pickup, but as it is, it's just not that great, and you shouldn't have to rely on your combat patrol being dependent on either the Blood Angels combat patrol or the Deathwatch combat patrol to come save it. It's going in the 1 point tier. There's just nothing else to say about this. As we look at the Deathwatch combat patrol, it's going to have an apothecary, a lieutenant, 10 intercessors, and 3 aggressors. It comes out to 395 points, it's $200 in the box, and you get about 16% savings. Deathwatch, congratulations. You might not be a real army, but you do at least have a real combat patrol. It's not great on its own, but the fact that it has this apothecary that can be used as an apothecary biologist, and it has a lieutenant, and it has the aggressors, means that there is really good value in here with Blood Angels, and kind of with Dark Angels. Now, I would never want to go and buy 2 of this box, because having 20 intercessors at the start of a collection of Space Marines sounds awful, but your combat patrol is going to get you a lot higher on this tier list than your rules ever possibly would. It's got a solid 2 points because it does have 2 characters, and both of them can lead a unit at the same time, and it is flexible across multiple armies of Space Marines. Deathwatch is going to find itself nicely in the 2 point tier below the Sisters of Battle, but above Black Templars. I know that it's disqualified, but I want to talk about the Space Marines Combat Patrol just in case anyone was curious about it. It's got a Captain in Terminator armor, a Librarian in Terminator armor, 5 Infernus Marines, and 5 Terminators. Comes out to 425 points, which isn't that bad on the surface, but it's $179 of value in the box, which means that you are getting 6% savings. I'm going to reiterate that. You are getting 6% savings. The only saving grace that this combat patrol has is that it has flexibility, because you can take the units in it and put them somewhere else. GW, you should really be ashamed of this combat patrol. It is abysmal. You have 2 characters who can only lead 1 unit in the box, and that unit can't have both of these as leaders at the same time, because the only unit in Space Marines that can go with the captain is a lieutenant, and a librarian can't do that. So either your captain is going to have nothing that it can lead, or your librarian is going to have nothing that it can lead, which means that the other one is stuck off as a solo unit, which some of the times, yeah, that's fine. But for a combat patrol where you are trying to get the basic fundamentals of your game down for new players, this is not okay. But you know what? Let's look past that. The savings of this box are barely above the cost of buying it just normally. It is massively outclassed by the starter set, and there was 0 point in making or releasing this other than to prey on poor beginners who did not know better. If this combat patrol was different than what you can get out of the starter set, fine, that would be okay. But the fact that it is the exact same box, except it has a librarian, and it costs an extra $60 is absurd. Oh my god, this thing is so bad. How is there a combat patrol worse than this? Space Marines, congratulations, you have earned your place at the absolute bottom of this tier list. This is abysmal. Let's just go look at a better combat patrol, and thankfully up next is Space Wolves, which is better. It's got a lieutenant, it's got 10 intercessors, it's got 5 Hounds of Mordecai, which can also be Reavers, and it's got an Invictor Tactical Warsuit. Comes out to 445 points, and it's $246 of value if you build them as Hounds of Mordecai and not Reavers, which brings it out to a 25% savings. This actually hits 3 points. It's got a lieutenant that can lead the intercessors, it's got a centerpiece model, and it is the only Space Marine box with a centerpiece. And it has flexible units that can be played across multiple armies if you wanted. Now, if you build the Hounds of Mordecai as Hounds of Mordecai and not Reavers, then you could lose a point here. But the fact that there is the option at least makes it okay. If you went and you bought this and you wanted to use it in your Blood Angels list or your Salamanders list, you're not screwed. By nature of having 3 points, it's going to go above Death Watch, but it's still not a Blood Angels combat patrol, so it's going right below it. We're done with all the Space Marines. We've covered them all. It's time to look at some Chaos stuff. And we're going to start off with Chaos Demons. It's got a Bloodmaster, it's got 2 units of 10 Bloodletters, it's got a unit of 3 Blood Crushers, and it's got 2 units of 5 Fleshhounds. Overall, comes out to 555 points, $294 in the box, and 42% savings. It's incredible. This is a fantastic box. It's got 5 points on my list. It's over 480. It's over 30% savings. The character in here, the Bloodmaster, can lead Bloodletters, and it's flexible. You can play this in Chaos Demons, you can play it in World Eaters, you can play it in CSM. And you know what? It's great to buy 2 of. Yes, it doesn't have a centerpiece model, and the fact that it's got so many Bloodletters and Fleshhounds makes me not very excited to buy 3 of them, but this is great if you like Khorne Demons. If you do want a good value combat patrol, it's insane. Every unit in here is competitively viable and strong. It's got great savings, can be ran with other armies. The fact that the only thing that I can say that really holds it back is it has too many Fleshhounds and Bloodletters is not too bad of a thing. If you took out 5 Fleshhounds and you put in something like a Skullmaster, I think this would have been the top 3 combat patrols in the entire game. Easily going into the 5-point tier. Now, unfortunately, we are going to take a little bit of a step back, and we're going to look at the Chaos Space Marine Combat Patrol. It's got Master of Possession, it's got 10 Cultists, 10 Legionaries, and 5 Possessed. 425 points, $217 with 23% savings, and it's only going to pull out 2 points on my list. It's got a character that can lead units in the box. Master of Possession can go with Possessed or Legionaries, if I remember correctly, and it's definitely not a bad pickup to buy 2 boxes of. Unfortunately, Legionaries can really be built the one way. The Possessed don't really have other options. Cultists don't have other options. And the Master of Possession doesn't have any other options. So what you're getting in this box is what you're getting in this box. You also can't field it with other armies. There's no good centerpiece model. It's just a little awkward because while everything in this box is good, they're all kind of good in different detachments, and they kind of want to do different things. I think that this would be a lot better if it had something that had some flexibility, but you could honestly maybe even buy 3 of these and still be okay. I just can't think of any list that would necessarily want 15 Possessed or 30 Legionaries. 30 Cultists would probably be fine in the Cultist detachment, but that's kind of about it. I definitely think that it's my favorite of the 2-point combat patrols, so it's got that going for it. Alright, it's time for my hot take of the day. Combat Patrol Death Guard. It's got Typhus, it's got a Biologus Putrefier, it's got 7 Plague Marines, and it's got 30 Poxwalkers. It's 415 points, $251 of value in the box, and it's 33% savings. Many people will call this the worst combat patrol in the game. I think that I have already proven why it is definitely not this. And you know what? All of the characters in this box have something that they can lead. The Putrefier can lead the Plague Marines, and Typhus can lead the Poxwalkers. I get that people are down on this because it has a named character. But do you know what Typhus does really well? He leads a unit of Poxwalkers into the middle of the board and is incredibly annoying. Yes, I would like it if this box had 10 less Poxwalkers, and maybe it had something else, like a Fetid Bloat Drone, or some Chaos Spawn, or hell, even Cultists. But this is a perfectly fine combat patrol to buy 1 copy of. It's not amazing by any stretch of the word, but it's completely serviceable, and with these kinds of savings, you can still at least start a Death Guard army in a pretty good place. I'm putting it right under CSM in that 2-point category because, damn it, I think this is actually a pretty okay combat patrol. Oh, GW, why? Why do you do this to me? Alright, let's deal with this piece of shit. It's got an Infernal Master, it's got 2 units of 10 Zangors, and it's got 5 Scarab Occult Terminators. It's 410 points, $221 in the box, and it's 24% savings. This is a 0-point combat patrol. This box does not meet a single criteria that makes a good combat patrol in my opinion. It's not enough points, it's low savings. The Infernal Master can't lead anything in the box, there's no big centerpiece model, it's not flexible because there's not a variety of ways to build the units or any other armies you can run these in. You don't ever want to buy 2 of these because of how many Zangors there are, and you certainly don't want to buy 3. I just don't get it. This was probably fine back in 9th edition, and even then, people did not like it because of the Zangors. The fact that it has gotten worse over time is astounding. Congrats, Thousand Suns. You have somehow managed to be worse than the Space Marine Combat Patrol on a technical level. You have earned your right to join Space Marines and Tyranids and the disqualified tier. The only reason that you are not ending up below those other 2 combat patrols is because I can't get you in the start collecting set. Someone get this garbage off my screen so I can actually go look at a good combat patrol before I give myself an aneurysm. Oh, thank God, World Eaters. You've got a Lord on Juggernaut, which can also be Lord Invocatus if you want to name character. You got 10 Jackals, and you got 2 units of 10 Khorne Berserkers. Overall, 525 points, $253, which is 34% savings, and you hit 4 of the points that I've got on my list. You're over 480 points, you're over 30% savings, you've got a character that can lead units in the box, and you know what? You're good to buy 2 of. World Eaters have a very limited selection. You don't got a lot of options. You want to run Jackals, you want to run Berserkers, and yeah, sure, the Lord on Juggernaut might not be the best thing to have as a second box, but even without him being in this box, just the Jackals and the Berserkers alone are already savings. And you know what? With such a limited set of options for World Eaters, there were some things that they were just never going to achieve. They were never going to have a cool centerpiece model because no, you're never going to get Angron in your combat patrol. But if you took out 10 Berserkers and put in, say, 3 8-bound, I think this would be an easy combat patrol to buy 3 copies of. Maybe even 4? I mean, it would still be a discount if you took out that Juggernaut. It would give you 3 Juggernauts and a Lord Invocatus, 40 Jackals, 40 Berserkers, 12 8-bound. And nah, that's probably pushing it. You're still probably just sticking with 2 or 3. But you know what? I respect the hell out of this box, and it's going straight into that 4-point category. Alright, we are done with Chaos. We are moving on to Xenos, and we are going to start with the Aeldari. In the box, you've got a Farseer, you've got 10 Guardian Defenders, you got 2 units of 3 Wind Riders, and you've got a Wraith Lord. Comes out to 485 points, $278 in the box, means you got 39% savings. Aeldari, congratulations, you have barely squeaked by on 5 points. You are over 480 points of value, you're over 30% savings, you've got a character that can lead units in the box, and the Wraith Lord is a centerpiece model that actually feels like a centerpiece model, and I think that this is okay to buy 2 of, and you'll be pretty happy. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I did have to debate with myself for a while about whether or not this was good enough to buy 2 of, because 12 Wind Riders is a lot of Wind Riders. But you know what? I thought about it, and the fact that you could take an entire unit out of this box, or you could even kit bash the Farseer into a Farseer on bike and still have a pretty good discount on that second box, means I think that it's more than reasonable as a double pickup. I would certainly not want to buy 3 of these, but 2 is still plenty good. Going to the bottom of the 5-point tier. I like Custodes better, and I like Chaos Demons better, but this is definitely good. But why in this world should we settle for good when we can go for great? The Drukhari Combat Patrol has 1 Archon, has 10 Kabalite Warriors, 5 Incubi, a Ravager, and a Raider. But what if we just took the extra guys off the boats, and then we had 20 Kabalite Warriors for 565 points with $318 of value in the box for a 47% savings? This combat patrol hits every single bullet point on my list. There is nothing that this combat patrol misses. It is a good amount of points. It's great value. It has a viable leader. It has a centerpiece model in the Ravager. And you know what? Arguably the Raider as well, given how Drukhari works. But even without that, because it's a transport and transports don't count in centerpiece models, it still has the Ravager. And you can run a lot of this army in Aeldari as a Ynnari list. And you are more than happy buying 3 of these. This box is cracked and is the gold standard of what a combat patrol should be. And the best part is that it's not even the best combat patrol on purpose. It's just because you can take off the extra guys. Without that, it is a solid box, but it is not the best box. And up next, you know what? We got the Genestealer Cults. And I think a lot of people are down on the Genestealer Cults, and for good reason. Their last combat patrol was incredible. In my opinion, it was the best one in the entire game, but let's see how this new one stacks up. It's got a Jackal Alphys to lead. It's got 2 units of 5 Metamorphs. It's got 5 Italian Jackals, and it's got 1 Achilles Ridge Runner. It's only going to come out to 365 points, unfortunately, which is substantially less than the last combat patrol by almost 40%. But this box still has $258 of value in it for a 39% savings. It's going to hit 3 points. It's got 30% savings. It's got a character that can lead units in this box, and I think that this is pretty easily worth buying 2 of. It is a big drop in quality from the last combat patrol, and it's still good savings for GSC. I think that says more about how bad GSC is to collect and how crazy expensive it is, but hey, you know what? If you wanted to get into this army, you probably knew what it was going to be going in. This is at least a semblance of a shining light for the army in the utter darkness that is the lack of the previous combat patrol. I really debated putting this pretty low on the 3-point tier because of how good the last combat patrol was, but taking out my bias for it in that sense, I think that it's just below the Blood Angels. The Blood Angels are a little bit better. They've got that extra flexibility, but you know, the GSC combat patrol is not as bad as people like to think it is. It's just that they're comparing it with what it used to be. Alright, up next is Votann. It's got a Call, who can also be Uthar the Destined. It's got 10 Hearthkin Warriors, it's got Chthonian Berserks, and it's got some Harnkin Pioneers. It's 360 points of value, it's $230 in the box, 27% savings. It's okay. It's one of the better 2-point combat patrols in my mind. It's got a character that can lead units in the box, and it's a pretty solid pickup of 2 copies. The 3rd copy is a little bit more iffy because then you're starting to have a lot of calls and a lot of warriors. But I think that overall this one's got the same problem that the World Eaters box had. Limited choices. There's not really much you could add in here to make it stand out more without going overboard with the savings. But at the same time, I feel like you could probably go a little overboard with the savings. I feel like because this is a newer army, it's okay to give players who want to start this army a good starting off point. Maybe throw in a Sagittar. Looking at this box, I think I'm going to put it at the top of the 2-point tier. I think it could go anywhere in those top 3 slots right now between it, Chaos Space Marines, and Death Guard, but I think that I like this one just a little bit more. Up next, we've got everybody's favorite undead Egyptian skeletons, the Necrons. You've got an Overlord. You've got 10 Necron Warriors. You've got 3 Scorpek Destroyers. You've got Canoptic Scarab Swarms, and you've got a Canoptic Doomstalker. Overall, 460 points, $207 value in the box, and that gives you 19% savings. This box is really close to being a great box in my mind, but overall, I think it's just pretty solid. It's another combat patrol that I like less than its previous iteration, but hey, it's still a 3-point combat patrol with a character able to lead units inside of it. It's got that cool centerpiece model in the Doomstalker, and I think it's a solid pickup for 2 copies of. I know that warriors are the typical face of the Necron frontline, so to say, but I just can't help but think about how much cooler this combat patrol would be if it had 2 units of 5 Immortals instead, which could then also potentially be Death Marks. If it had that, I think that this would be a pretty easy 3-copy box. As it stands, I want to put it at the top of the 3-point tier. I think it's a little bit better than the Blood Angels, but that's just because I kind of put a lot of value on that centerpiece model. And overall, I think that it just gives you a pretty good setup. Having 20 warriors, if you do wind up picking the second box of this, is actually still solid. Coming up on our last few combat patrols, and we've got the Orks. It is a beast boss, it is 2 units of 10 beast snaggle boys, and it is 4 squig hog boys. Not a lot of variety in the box, but it's still 450 points with $227 of value in the box with a 26% overall savings. This is the saddest 2 points that I have had to give any of these combat patrols. The Beast Boss can lead the Beast Snaggle Boys, which is 1, and I think it's worth buying 2 of, unless you really don't like Snakebite Orks. Now, I know that the Big Hunt might not have been the best before the data slate that just passed, but it is a phenomenal pickup for running any kind of the Big Hunt detachment. And you know what? It's also fine in Warhorde. This combat patrol has the downside of being a bit too focused on one style of unit, but at the same time, it makes it that much better for that kind of goal if you want to run something like it. If you want to run the Big Hunt, this is an easy 3 of to buy, even despite the fact that it is really only a 2-point box. Going straight to the top of the 2-point tier for me, there is no question about it. Alright, Tau, let's talk about it. You've got a commander, you've got 10 fire warriors, you've got 10 pathfinders, and you've got a devilfish. It's 370 points, it's $233 of value, and it's a 28% savings. Man, this is a weird box for me. On the one hand, it's got very flexible units because the fire warriors can be breachers or strike teams, the commander can be a cold star or enforcer, and the pathfinders have the kill team sprue, which means that you can play them in a completely different game mode than 40k. I love all of the units in this box. I think that everything in this box is great, but I don't like the box. Tau has so many good options for centerpiece models. Yes, they're never going to put a Riptide in here, but we saw a Ghost Keel in the last combat patrol, and it was awesome. You could put a Broadside in here, and yeah, it might be a little small for a centerpiece model, but it wouldn't be that awful. You know what would have been the best possible solution? You take out the Devilfish, you put in a Hammerhead. Why do you do that? Because the Hammerhead box comes with all the stuff to make a Devilfish, but you can also make a Hammerhead with it. That means that as a player, you would have the choice of either running this as a Devilfish for your Breacherfish combo, which is one of the best combos in the game. You could put your Pathfinders in it to get a Scouting Devilfish, which is really good, or you could run a Hammerhead or Skyray to make your opponent fear your shooting power against their tanks. There is a lot about this box that I think is great, and I would recommend that anyone who wants to start Tau from scratch buys 2 of these. But I can't recommend 3, and it's just missing that one little bit that I think it really needs, especially since Tau is one of the most expensive armies in the entire game to collect. I'm putting it underneath the Orks because I do still think that it is a better overall deal than the Votann, and I think that it gives you exactly what you want and is always going to be okay, unlike what you might find inside of Death Guard or Chaos Space Marines. But man, this could have been a great combat patrol if it just had a cadre in it, or if it had a Ghost Keel, or a Broadside, or if it had the Hammerhead instead of the Devilfish. Alright, let's round this out. We've got one last combat patrol to go, and that's just because I did Space Marines to point it out, so you know what, I'm obligated to do Tyranids. It's got a Winged Tyranid Prime, it's got 2 units of 10 Termagants, it's got 5 Barbagants, it's got 3 Von Ryan's Leapers, 2 Ripper Swarms, and it's got 1 Psychophage. It's 460 points, and it comes in at $289 or 42% savings. It is so close to hitting the mark on so many different things, but at the end of the day, this is a 1-point combat patrol because it has over 30% savings. Despite the great value of this box, it is simply not worth it because of the aforementioned starter set, which is cheaper than this, and even if you go and buy the extra box of Barbagants that aren't in the starter set, it is still cheaper than buying the combat patrol, and you get the free Space Marine army. Again, what would you rather have? You could buy 2 copies of this and have 40 Termagants and 2 Winged Tyranid Primes and 6 Leapers, or you could buy 3 starter sets and have 60 Gaunts and 9 Von Ryan's Leapers, and 3 Winged Tyranid Primes, and no Barbagonts. I feel like it's a pretty easy answer. Tyranids is going at the top of the 0-point tier. I know that I put Thousand Suns above Space Marines because Space Marines is in the free box pretty much, and you know what, so is Tyranids, but god damn it, I hate that Thousand Suns box, and I actually like the Tyranids box. Even if it is rip-off garbage and it is better as a start collecting set, I think that this Combat Patrol is still better than what you're getting out of Thousand Suns. But that's going to do it. We're all done. We've ranked them all. There's no Imperial Knights, there's no Chaos Knights, and there's certainly no Imperial Agents Combat Patrols. If you have any issues with where I put any of these boxes, please let me know in the comments. I do read everything, and I will see you all next week. Big shout out to all of my channel supporters who help make these videos possible, such as Comrade Chin, and everyone else who's been generous enough to support me. If you would like to try and help out the channel, please consider the links in the description where you can either check out the Amazon affiliate link or go support me on Ko-fi. Thank you all for watching.